before that. We're not going to read it all, but let's begin reading in verse 1. It says, "He also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him, and this man was wasting his possessions. And he called to him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do, since my master has taken the management away from me? Am I not strong enough? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided to do so when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses." So you have a dishonest manager. Is he embezzling money? Is he negligent with the master's goods? We don't know exactly, but we do know that he's going to have to give an account for his management, and the master's looking to let him go. I would argue that we, through inference, can safely assume that the manager was a dishonest manager, because when he is called to give an account of his books, where's his mind go? It's not to make a defense for himself, is it? It's to, what am I going to do? I can't dig, I can't beg, I'm going to have to figure something out. So what does he do? He goes to the master's clientele, and he asks them what they owe. And when they ask him what they owe, he says, give me this and we'll call it good. So he settles their debt at a discount. Now, when we go down to verse 8, and this is where some of the confusion falls. When you go to verse 8, it says, the master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. The practice of this manager was unethical. He had no right to do what he did with the master's debt or repayments. And so there are some who will come to this parable and it'll raise confusion, because it seems like Jesus is commending the unethical practices of this manager. But notice what he said. He didn't commend him for the practices. He commended him for his shrewdness. Now, me personally, when I was studying this, I went and in my mind, shrewdness meant cunning, his cunning behavior. Those are two different things. Cunning means you bring about an advantage to yourself through deceit and nefarious means. Shrewdness is a good quality. We would describe it as something along the lines of thinking outside the box, being innovative, practicing ingenuity, even being zealous and creative in certain things. And that's what he's commended for. And so we want to ask a couple questions. Is it possible, one, to commend for this parable, for us to draw a positive from it, and at the same time discount or disregard everything else? And I think Jesus did that on a few occasions. For example, in Luke chapter 18, we read about the persistent widow. And in that parable, Jesus says that there's a judge, and that judge has no respect for God or for man. He's a terrible person. And the whole purpose of the parable is the widow, on a constant basis, continued to bring her case before this judge. And he said simply because of her persistence, he was going to grant her what she requested. Now, when we step back and we look to apply that parable, God obviously sits in the place of the judge. We sit in the place of the widow. And the purpose of that parable is Jesus is telling us we should be persistent in our prayer life. If this judge, who had no concern for this widow's well-being, was willing to grant her request because of her persistence, he makes the point, how much more so is your Father, who wants what's best for you, going to listen to your persistence? How much will your persistence be beneficial to God? Now, none of us in here would take all the attributes of that wicked judge and apply them to our Father. Would y'all agree? We're not going to do that. What are we pulling from that parable? We're simply pulling from that parable. We're disregarding the characteristic of the judge when applying it to God, and we're simply taking the fact that God wants us to be persistent in our prayer life when we ask Him of things. All right, I'll give you another example. In 1 Thessalonians, and then in parts of Revelation, when it talks about the second coming of Christ, how is that described? He's going to come as a what? As a thief in the night, right? Now, anyone here willing to justify being a thief or stealing because Jesus is described as a thief in the night during His second return? No one here would do that, would they? What do? We disregard every characteristic because we understand that the only point that's being made is that Jesus' second return will come unexpectedly, a way a thief comes unexpectedly. So when we look at this parable, we're not commending the unethical practices. We're not commending that he was dishonest. We're simply commending that this man was shrewd in his thought process. I'm going to tell you how when I read this, what I kind of envisioned this manager to do. He's too proud to beg. He's too weak to do manual labor, and he's going to continue doing what he is doing. So what does he do? He goes and he gives a discount to clear the debt of at least some, if not all, of the master's clientele. So he's about to be without a job. He only knows really how to do one thing. And what has he done through his actions? One, he's gained favor with these clientele. Anytime you give a discount that large, you're going to be in good graces with somebody, right? And so when he goes out on his own, he already has favor with these individuals. And what else? This clientele is no longer indebted to the master. So from that standpoint, that's pretty wise, isn't it? To think of your future from that standpoint and then act on it. That's what Jesus is commending. He's not commending the dishonesty. He's not commending the unethical practice. He's simply commending that this man showed initiative and ingenuity in preparing for what was going to happen after the master let him go. Okay? Now, go down to verse 9, because there's another. We're going to come back to verse 8 in just a minute, but come down to verse 9, and it says, "And I tell you, make for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings." And there's some confusion there because Jesus says, make friends with unrighteous wealth. Now, the way to read that is not, the friend that we're making is not with the unrighteous wealth. He's saying use essentially unrighteous wealth to make friends, to gain favor with people. Now, many get confused because they'll see the word unrighteous wealth and will think, okay, well, what does Jesus mean here? This, to me, is one of the instances where you see Jesus in two words essentially teaching a lesson that took someone like Paul many words. Unrighteous wealth is just a way to describe money. That's all Jesus is saying here. Make friends with money. Not make money your friend, but make friends by use of money is the point he's making. But by using that term, unrighteous wealth, he is reminding his hearers of the dangers of money. In two words, remember what Paul wrote in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10? It's not money is the root of all evil. What is it? For the love of money is the root of all evil. Remember, Jesus, after the rich young ruler went away, what did he tell his apostles? He said, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for the rich man to enter into heaven. You go down to the end of this parable in verse 13, and what's he say? He says, no servant can serve two masters, for he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and what? And money, or mammon. So the point is when Jesus says make friends with unrighteous mammon or unrighteous wealth, by using that phrase unrighteous wealth, he's telling them, hey, money can be used beneficially for you from a spiritual standpoint. But keep in mind that the pursuit of money has its pitfalls. He's putting a warning in there with this parable. Can money be used in regard to God's work? Absolutely. As was mentioned, through it. So our aim this morning is just really to enlighten this parable, to pull from it the lessons that Jesus intended for us to pull from it, but also to illustrate Jesus as the master teacher. And I think hopefully by the end of this class, we'll have a better appreciation for that. Good use of money? I hope so. I think it was. I think anyone who supports a preacher to go out and do the work is using that money beneficially. And the point when he says make friends with money, I am indebted to every one of those congregations because of the monetary support that they gave me. They have, at least from that perspective, an eternal favor or gratitude from my perspective. Right? Have you supported mission work? Yeah, of course. Those missionaries, you've gained favor with the churches and the missionaries in other countries as a result of your spending that money to help support them. That's the point he's making. Make friends with money. Gain favor with money. Favor not only with those doing the Lord's work, but when we support the work of the church by giving our